Channel 25. That'll be on Channel 25. And so that basically means all the mistakes they're going to be making, you'll get to see over and over again. Kelsey will be flawless in this. Very nice to have you here. Welcome, Commissioner Perdue. You are newly elected January. So how have the first 4 months in office been?
Right, 4 months. So fun, interesting, busy, getting to know the community and my constituents and our stakeholders even more. And of course, getting to know city process a bit more, how city meetings work. We're getting ready to go into our annual budgeting process this month, actually. So lots of new, lots of learning, but all what I expected. So I've been having fun.
Well, and I know I've done a little homework on you. You've got a very diverse, very active background. You've done a lot of different things. What inspired you to say, City Commissioner, I want to step into this role? And not only that, I mean, you had to go door to door. This is not a cakewalk running for office for one of the city wards. Talk about that. What motivated you?
Yeah. So, it's hard to sometimes condense that answer into really, just a few sentences, but I'll try. First and foremost, I think running for office really was a natural extension of a lot of the work that I've been doing in the city for years. As you mentioned, my background is pretty varied, but really very community focused. I started my career in education. I've worked in workforce development. I've worked in policy. I've worked in community health, kind of all of these community-oriented social services, and really trying to understand how our systems work together to help folks, or maybe to not doing so well to help folks, and what I can do about it. So I have been civically engaged for as long as I can remember. When I was 15 years old, I was part of the Grand Rapids Mayor's Youth Council, so really spent a lot of time in City Hall over 15 plus years ago.
It's funny, I was just going to ask you about that, because typically we're inspired by maybe a family member or relative who is really a service-minded person, likes to be out in the community. What inspired you at 15 to get involved so young?
My parents were both service-minded folks. They weren't running for a local office. They weren't in roles like that, but just I saw them show up being really good neighbors, helping take care of each other. So that was really motivational for me. And then quite frankly, growing up here in the city on the southeast side and going to school, going to my neighborhood, going to visit my friends and my family, and just seeing how differently our community and our city served me and my community versus others, it really made me want to understand, why does my neighborhood look like this compared to that? Why does my school have these resources and not that one that's right next door? And so between those things, really my parents both really being service oriented in a more kind of everyday neighborly way, and then me being really curious of, how do we get here, and how can we improve things for myself, my generations, and those who come after us? Those were really my two main motivations, and it's been a fun ride. Like you said, a lot of work to not just prepare, but to also talk to voters and ask if I can earn their support to run. Really for most of last year.
Commissioner Kelsey Perdue is with us, newly elected in Grand Rapids 3rd Ward. Not only when you were talking to voters last fall, you were elected in November, but right now, what are you hearing, and what is continually coming back to you as some of the biggest challenges in the 3rd Ward, and maybe beyond that? And we should let our viewers know, the 3rd Ward, it's a uniquely designed area. It kind of juts all over the place, but it's primarily the southeast part of the city.
Correct.
And the boundaries go all the way down to 36 and as far
further than 36, all the way to 44th.
All the way to 44th. Okay, and quite a bit east as well. Yes. And then where's the northern boundary?
Wealthy Street.
Wealthy Street.
So Wealthy Street as far down as 44th in some areas, and then Jefferson. All the way. I mean, east is very kind of squiggly on the map, but as far east in some areas as East Paris. So it is a big chunk of the city, very, very diverse, like you say, and lots of, I think in recent years has been a focus of equity efforts, because historically the 3rd Ward hasn't been invested in the same way as other parts of the city, and our residents don't achieve the same outcomes, positive outcomes, as other residents of the city. So that's been a lot of the major focus in recent years.
And I would assume you heard that a lot, not only before the election, but now you're continuing to hear that. What are you kind of looking at in terms of your top priorities? I know you've only been in office for 4 months,
yes.
You've got priorities.
Absolutely.
If you could share those with us,
Absolutely.
we'd appreciate hearing about those.
Yeah, so when I run, I talked about helping to support a thriving third ward, a ward that is safe, secure, and strong. So really looking at broad root cause factors and how do we change systems and shift systems so that they better serve residents. So a holistic approach to public safety comes up. That includes housing, pathways for young people to be successful in our city comes up. Inclusive economic development comes up. We have a lot of room for development in terms of the traditional sense, both economic development, community development, and I want to make sure that the folks who have already been in the city, have stayed strong in the city, continue to reap the benefits from our growing prosperity as a region. So that's, kind of big picture, some of the things that are my priorities. My background, as I mentioned, is in advocacy, in community advocacy, youth advocacy. So I hope to bring that lens as well to really push as we create policies. Who are we benefiting? How do we try to level the playing field, both in terms of inputs and outputs, to better serve the residents of the third ward? So those are some of the things that I'm excited about, and I think heard over and over again as I talked to tens of thousands of voters last year, but really kind of everyone throughout the city, that I think we all want to march in that same direction. And so that gives me a lot of hope right now, even on the days where it doesn't feel like we're as cohesive as we could be. I do believe that we all want the best for our city, and we're all willing to put in the work to get us there.
Well, it's a very vibrant and growing ward. I mean, so much development, new businesses, but like you said, equity in the opportunities to start a new business is really important, because we want to have a diverse group of business owners, and not just, as you said in the past, well, that's just the way the third ward is. And I don't think that kind of attitude would even survive in 2023. I'm right, and I'm correct in making that assumption. Yeah. But I want to talk about, in terms of working with other city officials and your fellow commissioners, how has that been? I mean, obviously that's been a learning process as well, getting to work with that group, the city commission meetings. Can you talk about that? Yes.
So what's interesting is that 3 of the 7 seats at City Commission are held by new folks. There's 1 new person from every single ward. So who this commission makeup is or will be is, I think, still developing as we're all getting to know each other, our styles, our priorities. I have so much respect for everyone who sits on that dais, not to just run, but to care so much about the city that you run, you serve, you put in a lot of work that goes unseen, and you have a lot of conversations to try to find consensus and try to move us forward. Everyone brings their own unique lived experiences, professional experiences that I think makes us a pretty well-rounded body in terms of what we think about on policy issues. So I'm looking forward to working with every single one of my colleagues. We've already begun meeting one-on-one, meeting within our wards to get to know each other, to share priorities, to share stories, and also just appreciate all the support of folks who have been there to help onboard me to some of our processes, who to talk to within City Hall as I try to resolve issue for constituents. It's been a really good, I think, working relationship so far. We haven't gotten into anything super dicey yet, but I trust that we all are professional, and we'll get through those hard moments together as well.
Well, we know you have to be a great communicator, and you certainly check that box. What other qualities do you think, as you look at unique qualities you bring, along with your fellow commissioners? Can you talk about that in terms of, like you said, how you all get along in the sandbox?
Yeah.
There's more diversity than there's ever been.
Absolutely.
But, talk about that mix, if you will.
Yeah. So when I think about the makeup of commission, you have folks who have a very strong business background, folks who have a very strong community background, some folks who have both, some folks who have been working in policy for a long time, others who are more recently kind of translating the needs that they see and the changes that they want to see into policy. I think what I think I heard recently that the average age of a Grand Rapidian is about 33, 32, somewhere around there, early 30s. So I think of everybody on commission, I'm the closest to our average age of our residents. I'm in my early 30s. And so I think that's a uniqueness and a unique perspective. And when we talked about last November, when folks were thinking about the election and representation up and down the ballot, the role of people of color, women, age, career diversity, all that came to play. And what's interesting is that I think, maybe 10, 20 years ago, most folks who served on commission typically were business owners, were at the top of an organization, and so less a lot of flexibility to do both. And now we have folks like myself and a few others who work full time and who also give to the city full time. And so that's a different perspective where I think we can relate differently to our residents in terms of putting in those hours and still getting involved in our city and city business.
You mentioned that average age 33 years old for Grand Rapids residents, and you're in your early 30s. Do you think, and it used to be, it typically was, the older, well-seasoned representatives, politicians, they kind of look down. Do you think that age thing is less of an issue?
I really believe in intergenerational leadership. I think folks who are more seasoned or experienced have something they can learn from younger folks, younger professionals. And likewise, I think that folks like myself have a lot to learn from folks who've done this for a lot longer than I have. So what is very beautiful with our current city commission makeup is I think we have folks at almost every single decade, 20s, 30s, 40s. So I am really excited about the newness, the understanding, the wisdom, the energy that intergenerational leadership can bring for our city. So again, I'm only 4 months in, I think, to this new makeup. All of us are, but that's one of, I think, our newly unique traits that will make us stronger as an elected body and a representative body.
Yeah, that's good wisdom. And you will only continue to learn that as time goes on and as you go through more city commission meetings as well. We're with, by the way, 3rd Ward Commissioner Kelsey Perdue, newly elected. She's been 4 months on the Grand Rapids City Commission, and we have a lot more of our program yet to come. In fact, when we come back, we'll be asking Commissioner Perdue about the 3rd Ward and what that actually means when it's one thing to get elected, but what it means to represent a city ward. And also be thinking about those questions you may have for us. You can contact us, email right now at cityconnection@grcmc.org. We can answer your questions live on the air. And we have a lot more of City Connection still to come here on GRTV. We'll take a quick break and be right back.
For over 30 years after humble beginnings as a public access TV station, the Community Media Center has grown to be an active, multi-platform media and technology assistance organization, encouraging and enabling our community to push the creative boundaries. We power a variety of resources, including a music-centered community radio station, WYCE, a community venue with stage and screen at Wealthy Theater, citizen-driven journalism with the Rapidian, a web development team empowering local nonprofits, an education department that trains and broadens students' minds, and a free speech public access television studio, GRTV, where it all began. By introducing audiences to new voices and ideas, we enhance community engagement and create connections between artists and audiences, enriching our city's cultural offerings. We empower and collaborate with platforms and resources accessible to all and used by all. Every free democratic society depends on media, accessible to the community and uncensored by government. The Community Media Center continues this work for the media landscape of today and tomorrow. These platforms and services empower our neighbors to tell their stories and explore the richness of culture that Grand Rapids has to offer. Connect, discover, learn, create, and share. The Grand Rapids Community Media Center.
Thank you and welcome back. This is City Connection here on GRTV, and my name is Phil Tower. I'm in for your regular host, Starlette McDermott. We're in studio on this month, this May edition. We are live here on May 1st with 3rd Ward Commissioner Kelsey Perdue. We are going to talk a little bit more about the 3rd Ward, but you were kind enough to, our viewers were kind enough to email some questions, and I think you had written down one of the questions, Commissioner Perdue, about the fire chief. Someone was wondering if you had the ability to be a part of that process, which I think it was a good question.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yes, I can. I did. So prior to the search even starting, as a newly elected commissioner, the city has been great about having us visit different departments, getting different tours, and Deputy Chief Brown actually gave us a tour of one of the stations, showed us some of their processes around being very data driven around their decisions, and I was very, very impressed with him from the onset, just from that tour and that visit and that conversation. And then when the search was announced, I attended the public meeting, heard kind of that final round of interview, and was very impressed with Deputy Chief Brown. So that was my engagement in the process. It's ultimately city manager's decision, but I was very happy to hear that the position was offered to Deputy Chief Brown, and tonight is actually his oath of office and his swearing in to become our next chief of police. So very, very excited for him. I think his track record in our city around strategy, around data, around fiscal responsibility, his training, he has a doctorate degree in this stuff. I mean,
wow.
And he comes from a very diverse community in North Carolina, and so I thought he brought just a ton to the table, and happy to see him step into this role. So
great to hear you have that confidence in the process. Yeah. Commissioner Perdue, we have another question from Haley. She asked, you had talked about different neighborhoods getting different resources growing up. You grew up in the city. Do you think that's changed much since then? Can you talk about that?
Yes and no. So what has changed is a new focus on making sure that we are thinking more equitably in how we invest in neighborhoods and resources. And so I think there has been a ton of work to that end from all sectors, from our nonprofit sector, our for-profit businesses, the city, everyone. I think a lot of folks are at the table thinking about how do we invest differently, including the city. That being said, we still have a lot of those same outcomes. We still have inequitable outcomes, inequitable access to opportunities, whether it's a business district, a school area, a park. So I do think that's still our reality, unfortunately, in a lot of ways, but I think we've made a ton of progress and will continue to make progress in those areas. I think one great example of that is if you visit some of our business districts, if you visit Alger and Eastern versus right down the street, Eastern and Oakdale, you see that in one area we still have businesses that are boarded up, that are vacant, that might need a little TLC on the outside. And so we do have some programs through the city to help folks with facade improvements and to support new entrepreneurs to get into spaces and to kind of either start or to scale. So lots of effort being made. So I do not think we are where we were when I was growing up in our city, but we still have a long way to go, and to make sure that our next generations don't even have that same experience and don't know that that's our history. But they know from the onset our city is equitably resourced throughout. And it takes all of us to do that. There's a role for the city, there's a role for the county, the state, nonprofits, for-profits, neighbors. I mean, you name it, I think we all have a role to play, and I'm excited about what I can do within City Hall to that end.
Indeed. We've got another question for Commissioner Perdue, the 3rd Ward here in Grand Rapids. The question says, I grew up at Madison and Wealthy in the 1980s. I've seen lots of development along the Wealthy corridor, but hardly anything south of Franklin. How are you going to get the city to take a look at investing in that part of town? Certainly there's some opportunities there.
Absolutely. So I have to give credit to my predecessor and folks who've been on commission for a while, because over the last few years, there has been a lot of focus and a lot of conversations. Show me the breakdown of investments by ward. Show me how dollars shape up by wards. And even last week, when we were looking at the preliminary budget for next year, a lot of those investments were broken down by ward because of that precedent set by folks before me. So, I'm kind of really continuing to carry the baton. I can't take credit for, what's to come. But that being said, there are new tools that we have, economic development tools, particularly within the southeast side of town. We have the Southtown Corridor Improvement District, where that is one place where we use dollars and incentives to support local businesses, and that is run by a board that has city commission representation, but it also has business representation, homeowner representation, nonprofit representation. So we have these bodies that we can use to really help us identify the problem and identify kind of how we can make our resources more equitable, and then kind of funnel those dollars out accordingly.
There certainly are resources there. I'm curious, now that you're elected, you're serving in office as the Third Ward Commissioner, the residents in the Third Ward, I think there's a common thread that anyone wants to feel like they're heard by their elected officials. And I'm certain you heard that. They feel like, okay, I'm going to elect you, Kelsey, and then you're going to forget about me. How do I know you're going to be responsive as my Third Ward Commissioner? I mean, that's going to be a challenge and an opportunity at the same time, because if someone wants to feel heard, they've got a question. Maybe it's a young African-American woman who says, is the dream really alive? Can I start my own business? What kind of resources is the city going to be providing me so they can have my back?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that process? Because there are a lot of people in the Third Ward.
Yeah.
You want to feel responsive to them.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you brought this up. Even as I was running last year, I said to a lot of folks, outside of the everyday items like making sure your sidewalk is prepared, or there's no potholes on your street, or the big ticket items like police and housing, on top of those, kind of the big P, small p policy issues, folks just want to be seen and folks just want to be heard. And I think in the Third Ward, when I look across the city and I think about our history, particularly in recent years, I think that we have a lot more room to boost morale, to boost trust, and to boost presence. And I think part of that does fall to me in terms of my responsibilities. So I've been telling folks, hey, I am down to talk. We can have coffee, we can talk on the phone, but reach out. We are not limited to city commission meetings where folks get that 3 minutes of comment. We can go deeper. We can have more of an exchange to make sure that you do feel heard, and that we can have a two-way conversation. I can respond, whether it's resources, information, or just kind of a good to know. But to your question around, kind of you gave an example of someone looking for resources. I went to an event maybe a month and a half ago, Black Voices by the River, a kind of constituent group, stakeholder group thinking about development along the river and what that means for the African American community in our city. And I heard a lot of new developers or business owners saying, is this going to be any different? And so we ended up having a panel, like a full community kind of room discussion. A lot of really great things came out of that. But I probably had 3 or 4 follow-ups from that one event, either connecting folks directly with resources for their businesses, talking to folks about kind of some of the decisions that have been made or where we are in the process, so on and so forth. So, I'm committed to being responsive, to listening. I think that's just as important to the everyday person in our city as the votes that I make a few Tuesdays a month. So my email is open, kperdue@grcity.us, if you need some help. And I have to say, I rely a lot on city staff. I mean, they really are the subject matter experts, but I can help navigate City Hall and find the right person to talk to, whether it's within City Hall or outside, depending on what folks need, or if it's just a listening ear about some of the issues that are important to you, I welcome that as well.
There you have it. Pretty direct answer from Commissioner Perdue. We have another question, and this is almost like that sidewalk question. This is an everyday real life question from Liam. My neighbor's dog starts barking at 6 a.m. every morning. I've asked them to take care of it, but this has continued for months. Is there anything the city can do to warn them? Can the city intervene and help Liam out with a noisy dog that's waking him up at 6 a.m.?
Potentially. I've been dealing with this. I have some neighbors who are dog sitting, love them to death. The dog is so sweet, but he also is an early riser and a barker as well. So I totally get where you're coming from. So potentially, the city does have noise ordinances. And so if that is breaking that ordinance, there's a possibility for folks to get involved. I also think for the city to get involved in a formal way. I also think that's an opportunity to, if you have a neighborhood association near you that's really active, or if you do have a good relationship with your neighbor to talk to them about what that means if you're woken up too early, how that interferes with your rest for work, so on and so forth. So potentially, depending on if they are indeed violating an ordinance that we have on the books. Other than that, I think there's always opportunities to try to talk and resolve together really as neighbors. Sometimes that works better than others. But so if that is an issue and if you want us to look into it, I'm happy to kind of take that and look into that a little bit more with you, Liam.
Yeah, we're not sure if Liam lives in the third ward, but certainly do follow up with Commissioner Perdue, and we will get you in touch with the right people about the noisy dog. We have more questions we're going to answer. We've had some great questions so far, and
Nice
we really
range.
appreciate those. cityconnection@grcmc.org. That's the email. You can message us right now at cityconnection@grcmc.org, and we'll be happy to answer more of your questions live on the air. We're going to get into the budgeting process for a first-time commissioner to be knee-deep in the numbers here. We're going to kind of look at that coming up as well too. And again, more of your questions at cityconnection@grcmc.org. We are live on this May 1st, Monday, May 1st, and we would welcome your input as well. I'm your host, Phil Tower. We'll have more coming up in just a minute or two. Remember again, that email is cityconnection@grcmc.org. We're with 3rd Ward Commissioner Kelsey Perdue, newly elected 3rd Ward Commissioner here on City Connection. We're going to take a quick break and we'll have more coming up in just a moment.
The Wealthy Theater is Grand Rapids' local movie theater and performance center. Since 1998, it has been a host to nationally touring music groups, local theater performances, and a variety of community events. Today, the Wealthy Theater is not only a landmark community treasure with historic significance, but a pioneer in the infusion of technology and traditional theater. Underneath the elegance and classic sensibility that defines Wealthy Theater, there is a matrix of new technologies. The theater is completely digital and outfitted with cameras and microphones for concerts, theater and comedy troupes, speakers and lecturers, and so much more. Experience all that Wealthy Theater has to offer. And bring a friend. Be surprised by the Wealthy Theater.
WYCE is a world of music. We aim to shine a light on underserved musical artists in a non-commercial format with no advertisements. Volunteers come in to create personalized music programming that broadcasts over the air at 88.1 FM to West Michigan and via the internet to listeners all over the world. These listeners sponsor our efforts, keeping WYCE independent and community-owned. Musicians use the station to broaden their audience and build support for their latest projects by submitting their music to be included in our broadcast and performing live in studio. Businesses find their customers through underwriting, nonprofits inform the community to their mission, and listeners stay informed about local events. We believe that music is a powerful force that creates quality relationships in our community, that speaks to our emotions, and provides the soundtrack to our lives.
And welcome back. This is City Connection. Once again, we are live on this Monday, May 1st. I'm your host, Phil Tower. Starla McDermott, our regular host, has this edition of City Connection off. And because we're live, we encourage you to reach out to us. City Connections at grcmc.org. You can send us an email, and we've got a great question for Commissioner Perdue from Beth. Beth is asking Commissioner Perdue, what are your greatest concerns and hopes with the affordable housing crisis in Grand Rapids? It's certainly a crisis across the country. Beth says, it seems hopeless to me and my wife right now, and we are in the right on the edge of affording our home we've had for years. A common frustration expressed by a lot of people, Commissioner Perdue, whether they're 33 or 53 or even 25 and they're working and they're trying to save up for the first home. It's really challenging, especially because limited inventory, but just affordability, higher mortgage rates. You know, as a city commissioner, you don't have a magic wand, not yet.
Yes, I can't wish.
But it's certainly an issue that every city should be addressing at some level. Can you talk about that? At least what you saw running for this important position as Third Ward Commissioner, and kind of what you're seeing as an insider.
I mean, Beth hit the nail on the head. You know, we don't, and you did as well. We're in a housing crisis in general, certainly an affordable housing crisis. If we peel back and try to figure out the why, a lot of it does come back to we don't have enough housing units. Our housing needs assessment report that was released a few years ago was recently redone to confirm, have we made any progress? Are there additional needs based on the last time that we saw these numbers? And we saw the answer is yes. We still need more housing at all price points. So whether you are at kind of lower income, 30% AMI, a lot of folks are getting familiar with that language, we need more housing, or you're at over 120% AMI, we need more housing, literally at all price points. And when we don't have it, you see what happens right in my neighborhood where folks who could typically compete for more affordable housing are being totally priced out by folks who just have more disposable income because they don't have kind of that match. So a lot of it is around we need to build more. And the role of the city in that while we don't build housing, we can approve incentives. We can look at zoning changes to make sure that it is easier for folks to build. And so those are some conversations that we've started to have. And I've heard an appetite really from the majority of the group that says, yes, let's put everything on the table. And let's see what we can do, because we all recognize that we need to do more. And again, while we might not be building housing, there are some things that we can do. Till that end, we just approved quite a number of grants coming from the feds, as well as some local dollars that we put into our own affordable housing fund to support the additional build of hundreds of more units. So again, that feels like a lot. You're like, yes, that's a win. You have a few hundred more, but we know in big picture, in terms of the scale of the issue, that is a drop in the bucket, and we need to accelerate. So we are looking at changes of, one, how do we change zoning laws? How do we think about incentives, making sure that those are in place, but also making sure that folks know kind of the complexity of the issue and are willing to come to the table with us. So Beth, you are right that we are in a crisis, and I do want to recognize a lot of our nonprofits who are kind of helping folks think about and getting ready to buy. But again, with these prices, no matter how great of a budgeter you are, I know that is just not the issue, right? The issue is a lot larger than that. So that is definitely will be a priority of ours in the coming years. Where we've already begun that conversation, including with our conversations about the coming budget process. So thanks for that question.
Third Ward Commissioner Kelsey Perdue is with us on City Connection. I promised I wanted to dive back into the conversation on the budget. You are seeing that for the first time as a city commissioner. Can you talk about what you're seeing from the inside, and especially your role? There are a lot of people involved in that city budgeting process. Your role as a Third Ward Commissioner, do you feel like you're going to be able to well represent the Third Ward? And if you could just talk about that from your perspective. I know it's a big piece overall.
It is. I was studying my binder that's about this thick over the weekend.
It's a big binder.
It's a big binder, but lots of great information. I think there's a lot of great background knowledge to understand, a lot of guidelines on why we do what we do, requirements that we have to meet that are important to consider, and the budget as a whole, right? We have a lot of focus on the general fund publicly, but if you look at our whole budget, there's a lot of really, really good investments, either continuation or an extension of existing services or initiatives, many of which are directly in response to what we hear residents need. So the process, we got an overview late April, and then every single Tuesday for the month of May, we'll do a work session. So we'll dive deeper into a few of the topics, have discussion, talk about priorities, talk about, what's hitting the nail on the head, what do we wish was there that might not be there, so on and so forth. So very, very early in the budgeting process. I'll be curious to know how we'll answer that question in June. But just really looking, I think that is one of the most important things that we do is pass that annual budget. So really looking forward to some really rich conversations around it.
Indeed. There was also $9.6 million awarded for neighborhood investment and home ARP programs. What do you know about that funding allocation? What's going to end up in the third ward?
So those dollars are mostly federal dollars that come through the city through our community development department. And there was an application process where nonprofits, neighborhood associations could apply for the dollars that in alignment with some of our strategic plans. So we saw applications around housing quality, youth employment, new beginnings work, public safety. There's a really, really long list. And so what our internal team did was kind of match up those applications and the strength to what is in our strategic plan and then where do we have dollars. And so we have a lot of folks, or I would say a number of folks in the third ward that got some of those dollars. Some of our neighborhood associations like Heritage Hill, which is second and third, Urban League, which is right in the heart of the third ward, kind of towards the south end. So there certainly is some representation there. We also heard from neighborhood associations and others to say, we've never benefited from these dollars. We'd like to understand the process more so that we can be better prepared next time. And so myself and Commissioner Moody, some of our city staff are meeting with our third ward neighborhood associations to try to make that process a little bit more transparent. And so they're better positioned to apply and to get some dollars to support their work next time.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Commissioner Kelsey Perdue is with us, third ward city commissioner here in the city of Grand Rapids. We've got a question from Dion, and Dion is asking, what are the powers of a city commissioner? Well, we know she doesn't have a magic wand, but good question, Dion. Do you propose or write ordinances, and how do you go about enacting your priorities? Let's start with the first part of that. Yeah. Ordinances. Do you have the power as a commissioner to propose or to actually write an ordinance for consideration?
I believe so. To get to the point to be voted on, an ordinance would need to be vetted to make sure that it's not breaking or going against any existing law, that it is within our legal authority. So there's a lot of pre-work that needs to be done in order to get it on the agenda, to get it discussed, to make a motion to approve. And there are 7 folks as part of City Commission, 2 folks from each ward. We have 3 wards, so that's 6, plus the mayor at large, so that's 7. And so in order to get anything done at the city, really from a policy and ordinance perspective, you need the majority of votes, so you need 4. You need 4 to get stuff done. And so, I appreciate a lot of the excitement and trust in elected leadership, and just like at the state and federal level, it really is a group effort, and so the majority really does rule. So my priorities alone, what I want to see alone is not, there's no magic wand, there's no directive to make that happen, but it has to be a collaborative effort with the majority of that commission. So things come in front of us, we vote on it, and we need 4 to get it done.
You know, it's interesting, you talked about having to have buy-in from each of the 2 commissioners for each ward, and then the mayor, and then you vote on that. I'm curious, especially if there's an obvious need in one of the wards, do you have a sense, and you've only been in this role for 4 months, do you have a sense that the other ward commissioners would come alongside for the good of the whole city to say, yeah, we're in the first ward and the second ward, but we see that as a real and urgent need in the third ward? Do you have a sense of that at all?
I haven't experienced it just yet in terms of something just right in front of us and needing to have that conversation. But I think we all recognize that we serve the whole city, and we each are elected from our ward, and we obviously the unique needs of our ward is our priority, and yet we know that a lot of these issues like housing are really a city or really a regional issue in some cases. So I think we all are on the same page about that, that we all are here to serve the city as a whole, and we know that within each of our neighborhoods or our wards that there might be unique needs that arise. So we'll see how that plays out kind of in the coming months when it comes to budget and some other issues. But generally speaking, I think there's great understanding about that.
I think if you were to propose an ordinance that mandated the city provide free ice cream on every Saturday in summer, I think that would probably go across all 3 wards. We've got a great question from Glory. Thank you, Glory, for your question. She emailed us at cityconnection@grcmc.org. Glory said there was a big push to criminalize homelessness in downtown Grand Rapids over the past year. That was an issue. Got a lot of news coverage. What is your position on that issue, and what are you hearing about in terms of kind of the people that were shouting that, saying we need resolution on this? I'd love to hear your opinion and just your take on that, Commissioner
Absolutely.
Perdue.
So the bulk of that conversation happened, I think, last November, December. And the commission at the time said, no, we're not pursuing this, and we put a plug in it. Well, I thought it was pretty much closed. And then when I took office and other new commissioners took office, we heard from community, tell us where you stand. We want to be sure that there's still the same sentiment. And so I said then from the dais, I am not interested in looking at what was brought before us. I don't think it addresses the issue. I think it can do more harm than good. I understand some of the frustrations of making sure that we have safe spaces for everyone, and that means for everyone. And so I think there are some other things that we need to do in terms of resources, better coordination of resources, alignment of resources, true support for the folks in our community who need it the most, right? I would rather that be the focus of some of our efforts and our conversations and our dollars and our enforcement, rather than kind of what came in front of us late last year.
Well said, and certainly one that you need to be responsive on when those kinds of issues come up. We're speaking with 3rd Ward Commissioner Kelsey Perdue. We've had some great questions. Again, your questions are welcome as we are live on this Monday, May 1st at cityconnection@grcmc.org, cityconnection@grcmc.org. And if you're watching the stream, you can leave your question in the comments. Stay tuned. We have another quarter of the show still to come here on City Connection on GRTV.
How do you build a strong local food economy? Meet Chris. Chris is opening Osteria Rosa, a locally sourced Italian restaurant in a building brought back to life by 616 Development. But he doesn't know any local farmers to supply him with food year-round. This is Melissa. Melissa runs the Fulton Street Farmers Market and publishes a long list, even in the dead of winter, of available produce, meats, bakery goods, and more on the Rapidian. This is Amy. Amy wants to do more to support the farmers in her local food economy. Amy talks to Melissa, who introduces her to farmers at the Fulton Street Farmers Market, and Amy, in turn, publishes their stories, also on the Rapidian. Chris hears about the Rapidian and now has access to a local grocery list and information that he needs to make connections with local farmers. He feeds his patrons with local food year-round. Connections multiply. Meals are shared. A stronger local food economy is built.
Welcome back. This is City Connection, and we are live on May 1st Monday, May 1st, and we are so glad that you have joined us. A lot of great questions for 3rd Ward Commissioner Kelsey Perdue, and we want to thank you for those. There's still time to leave a question at cityconnection@grcmc.org. If you're watching us on Facebook, you can also leave a comment there as well, and our crew has been getting those questions for us. 3rd Ward Commissioner Kelsey Perdue is with us, and Commissioner Perdue, we have a question from Noel, who says, gun violence continues to be the #1 cause of death for kids in the U.S. How is Grand Rapids keeping our kids safe? This is a lot bigger than just a city issue, but you know, you're in a unique role as a city commissioner to prioritize gun violence, to at least get it into the public discussion more often. Tragically, we see mass shootings and it's kind of like, you know, there's a fire someplace. It's almost like an everyday news story. I'd just love to get your perspective on that and how you feel you can use your role as a city commissioner to bring that conversation to the forefront.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Great question. This question probably leads to the most worry for me. I really worry about our young people in the city. I worry about them having things to do to keep them active, engaged, productive. I'm born and raised in Grand Rapids, but I've lived other places. I've lived outside of our country for about a year, and I also lived in our nation's capital. And when I was there, I remember there just being a really great focus and energy around mentorship. So a lot of folks, after they got off work, a lot of young professionals, after they go to work once a week, at least once a week, they will go and they will mentor young people around academics, around kind of social skills, what have you. And I was one of those people as well. And then when I moved back to Grand Rapids, I was a bit surprised to see the lack of that intergenerational leadership that we talked about, that intergenerational support. And so I worry about our young people because I think we need more community centers, we need more programs, and there's a role for obviously our school system, the city, our nonprofits, our families, everyone. But this is the issue that I think worries me the most, and thinking about how can I leverage this role and stay kind of in my lane and not step on toes, or really leverage this role to provide more attention and to hopefully bring in some more resources and support, because our young people need to be supportive. And we can't be reactionary about it. When you're at the point of talking about gun violence, we're kind of at the end of the rope. How do we get ahead of the issue, build relationships, make sure there's support services? So I've been talking with some of our local nonprofits who are doing work in this space. I was at the Urban League for a lunch and learn about the Cure Violence program that many people are familiar with, and learned about some of their initial outcomes, what are some of their greatest challenges, what do they need, and so hoping to continue those conversations to kind of get to how can I best support and leverage. It is a huge issue, so thank you for that question.
It is a great question, and it's multiple areas that need to be addressed, including the mental health and wellness of individuals as well. It's May, and this is also Mental Health Awareness Month, so good to know that that is a priority, and you're already working on that. We're with 3rd Ward Commissioner Kelsey Perdue here on City Connection. If you look into the future, and I know nobody has a crystal ball, but kind of some of your hopes and dreams for the 3rd Ward, maybe a year or two down the road, maybe as you run for election again. What do you think in terms of what you would like to see in terms of growth, in terms of progress for the ward that you represent?
I want the 3rd Ward to be someplace where people can live, work, and play comfortably, confidently. So that means that our districts where we do have vacancy and blight, those spaces are activated. It means that our parks are high quality. It means that we have healthy streets. I can ride my bike without worrying about bumping into a pothole. It means that we have lots of resources and services, whether you are a small business owner, a parent looking for a program for your young person, the young people in your life, or you're looking to find a job. I think for a lot of years there was this focus on downtown and how do we get people downtown, and that's a great conversation, but I'm also interested in how do we allow people to stay in their community, in their neighborhood, that is walkable, that there's amenities that meet meet their diverse needs. Those are the conversations that I'm interested in the third ward. I would love to see us get to that place where you can live, work, and play comfortably. You feel safe, you feel supported, you're connected to your neighbors. You know, and there's a lot that goes into it. I'm thinking about some of the earlier questions about housing affordability. There's so many just different systems that either help move that along or make it more difficult for folks. There's a part to play for jobs and employment, paying living wages to residents. We have a lot of folks in our city who work, but their earnings just aren't enough to cover the cost of living. And so there are a lot of big conversations that we can have and that we need to have and we will have. And again, there's a role for everyone, but ultimately I want third warders to feel good about staying in the third ward. And yes, you can go over the city, you can go downtown for special events, sure thing, but that home base feels really, really strong, and you're proud to kind of spend your weekends and your evenings hanging out there.
We've got another question we're going to get to in just a moment. I'm curious, you grew up in Grand Rapids, but you've had the opportunity to go to other cities. You were in D.C., you were overseas. I think you were in Dominican Republic,
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
I'm curious in terms of this city, and to be very transparent, it was a very segregated city and still is in a lot of respects.
Yeah.
I've noticed some areas, though, that feel less segregated and gives me hope. I just wondered what your take is on that. It's 2023, especially after being away, coming back. We're not there yet, but do you see progress in certain areas?
Depends on how we frame that up and how we're defining success. We know that, what you're speaking to is diverse neighborhoods that are not segregated by race or by socioeconomic status,
Yes.
right? I mean, research shows that the most socioeconomic diversity you have in an area, that's what makes it stronger on both ends. And I think we have a ways to go. I think we're starting to see some of that, but I think that is coming with displacement. It's coming with, we don't have a lot of options, and so folks who have a bit more means, who have more choice, more disposable income, more agency, they kind of are able to make different choices than folks without that. So on one hand, it's good to see us kind of live, work, and play a bit more together, but I'm worried about some of these consequences around displacement, around gentrification, around living wages not keeping up, around our racial income gap. If you look at data for our greater metro area, folks who have the same education level, there's a real disparity by race. So for example, a white community member, a black community member, they both went to college, they have their collegiate degree, and they're both on the job market. Well, that white person has, I think, a 2.1, they're 2.1 times more likely to get a high quality job with that same degree than that black person. That is, that is not anecdote, that is not subjective, that is real hard
that's
data and
speaking
facts.
to institutional racism, which is still a challenge in many areas.
Yes.
And I just spoke with someone from the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce who was saying it's still an issue with lending, that black and brown people have traditionally been discriminated, looked on with a different set of lenses for funding for not only businesses and starting a business, but for mortgages and all other kinds of lending.
And speaking of mortgages, when I bought my house, I got really lucky with an agent and a loan officer who helped me through the process, because I did not know what I was doing. But what they told me at the end of the process was their company almost didn't want to work with me because I wasn't buying a $400,000 house. I was buying something that was very affordable in my price line, in my neighborhood. And luckily that person advocated for me, even though they did not know me, to really kind of fight against that. But those kind of micro inequities are happening every day across industry, and they add up. And again, if we think about ownership in roles, there's certainly a place for governmental leadership, and there's certainly a place for industry leadership, for better regulations in some cases, right? It shouldn't be that I might not get a chance to purchase a home that I can afford because the commission won't be as much if I was buying it out in Forest Hill. So lots of work to do, and I think sometimes when we talk about issues, you can just keep pulling the string and find more and more of the picture to make it more complicated. Indeed. And it can kind of make your head hurt. But I think there are a lot of folks in every industry across the board who recognize this, either through the data, through lived experiences, are making new commitments to say, how do we make this better? And what is my role?
Well said. We're going to quickly get a question from Madeline. I live along Bridge, and all through the summer, motorcycle groups drive down the road, making it very tough to have a conversation or hold work or school meeting for 5 to 10 minutes at a time. Just wondering if there's anything that could be done. They're here and gone. We hear them here at the Community Media Center on Bridge Street all the time. It's not just Bridge Street, it's a lot of other areas.
Yeah.
What do you recommend for Madeline?
Yeah. So interesting, because where I grew up, the sound of motorcycles is like, summer's here, summer's coming. But I recognize a lot more, that's not most people's experiences. So there's potentially something we can do. It might be violating a noise ordinance. So that's something to look at. We do have a policy where if there are traffic violations, we don't like chase folks, right? If they're like breaking a traffic law, we won't, like our GRPD won't pursue because we're worried about putting other people in danger. But if you want to follow up, I think Madeline, email me or email your First Ward City Commissioner, and we'll see what options we have for you, because I think I've heard that quite a bit from kind of some of the West Siders too on Big Street.
Indeed. Commissioner Kelsey Perdue, 3rd Ward Commissioner with the City of Grand Rapids, thank you so much. You said the hour would go fast. The hour went fast. We want to thank all of our viewers for tuning in to City Connection, and we hope to have you join us next month. We'll have Commissioner Perdue back maybe another 4 or 5 months from now, when she'll almost be a veteran commissioner. Don't forget to mark your calendars for our next episode, June 5th, where we'll delve into more important topics impacting our great city of Grand Rapids. Be sure to join us then. I'm your host, Phil Tower. Starlin McDermott will be back on the next City Connection. We'll see you again real soon.